As more and more people get Teslas and other EVs, it's becoming very evident that learning how to charge on the go is not as simple as people believe, and education needs to happen. So this video is a part of that journey. Plus, can and should AI learn forever? Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. First, very briefly, I want to say that I'm going to try to insert a little bit of AI news at the end of generally Tesla news and things like that. A little bit different format, but I thought it might be an interesting thing to do. And that way, if you're only interested in the Tesla aspect of it, you can just stop watching and I'll identify where I switch topics. And if you want to get a little bit of news in AI, since it's like every day something new is happening, then I'll put something as a little addendum at the end, just so you know that. So we'll start with that today and see how it goes. So I think I'll title this video something like the supercharging education problem and how to solve it, something like that. But basically the idea is that early adopters of Teslas and other EVs as well were early technology adopters, right? They're the kind of people who are willing to undergo some discomfort, not really understand how things work, use Google. Back in the day, it would have, gone to the library or something. It's the kind of people who are willing to figure it out on their own and learn how something works. And that gives them pleasure, right? Whether it's EVs or other technologies like early cell phones, or even, when people first had automobiles, it was something that took an awful lot of know-how to be able to utilize an automobile back in the day. I'm sure I wasn't alive back then, thank goodness. But anyway, we're talking about something that requires people who are of a certain mindset to be able to use these early products. And certainly we see that with Teslas. There was, for a long time, there was the low hand down Tesla wave. When we purchased our Tesla, it was right around the end of that time period. But for the longest time, since there were so few Teslas, people sort of waved at each other on the down low as they would drive past each other, because that was like an in thing that they did with each other. But anyway, that type of person, and I consider myself one of those, even though we didn't purchase a vehicle that early because the expense is just very high. But anyway, I'm a very early technology adopter. I use beta software. I've got beta software on my laptop. I've got beta software on my phone, which is actually recording this. I just looked for it. I've got beta software on pretty much everything. I'm always like, yeah, give me the beta. I will try it out. I'll figure out how to make all of this stuff work. So I'm that kind of person, but the bulk of people are not that. They just want something that works and something that's obvious and makes sense, and they don't have to think about very much. So what we're getting is the beginning of that S curve where it's very, very flat and you have the early adopters, and now it's starting to tip up, and we're getting to that very fast acceleration middle part of the curve where general population tends to use the product, in this case Teslas and other EVs. And the problem with that is that those people are not the kind of people who are like, yeah, I'll figure it out. I'm really interested in this technology and I'll look into it and figure out how to make it work and research the various options to really get a good understanding of what's going on. In general, the people in the middle of the pack really just want something to work. And then the people at the end of the pack, who are the laggards, the last part of the S curve where it flattens out again, are people who are sort of belligerently anti the new technology. So there will be people like that who's like, you can pry my car, my ICE car, out of my cold dead hands, or whatever they're going to say. But anyway, in the middle part of the pack, we've got people who are perfectly willing to purchase a technology like an EV, but they don't want to put in the effort to really understand it. So the problem is that then you get these people who are dealing with superchargers, which is not as trivial as a gas station. People grew up with gas stations, so they understand. I guess maybe gas stations aren't trivial, but since we all grew up with it, you put the little hose into the hole in the side of the gas thing, you squeeze it. Of course, you have to pay for it and all that stuff first too. But you squeeze it, and at some point the little thing stops, and then you pull it back out again and put it back on the thing, and you're done. I will say that back when I was a kid, they didn't have the stoppers because, of course, the gas station attendants would do the filling and stuff, and at least some places they weren't good stoppers. They worked most of the times, but sometimes it would just start flooding out and stuff. So even that technology several decades ago was not perfected by any means. So if you think that this is just like a done deal and no problem, all of this stuff evolves over time. I guess that's what I'm saying. But of course, the problem is that EV charging is not as simple as that, or at least something that people aren't used to. And so there needs to be an understanding of how to do, I guess, best practices for supercharging. I'm drawing on my own experience here, and also from Keith, Mars Embassy, who you can find on YouTube and Twitter. Great guy. You should definitely subscribe to him. That he drives Uber and Lyft in his Tesla, and he just sees people all the time at superchargers and sees the amount of misunderstanding that's going on consistently at superchargers. So a few basic things. There's kind of 4 ways to charge. Number 1 is what I'm doing right now, which is my Tesla is plugged into just an outlet, a 120 volt outlet at my parents' house, and it's running to the car and charging very, very slowly, around 3 miles an hour. So it's very slow, but it's still over 10 hours. It can put 30 to 40 miles on the vehicle, so it's not nothing. The second way to charge, which is the way that is preferred by most Tesla owners, and I assume most EV owners, is that you either plug into your dryer outlet or you get a dedicated 240 volt 30 amp circuit or 60 amp circuit, and you can charge at 24 or 48 volts, and then you can usually put somewhere between 20 and 40 miles per hour on the vehicle. So you can charge at a reasonable rate, right? If you have a car with 300 miles, you can do that in under 8 hours. So as you sleep, you put the miles onto the car, it's charged up in the morning, and you leave, and no big deal. So those are the 2 home charging options, which people are probably somewhat familiar with if they have an EV. The third one is what's called a destination charger, or basically an alternating current charger that's a post somewhere. It's a charge point. Some EV Go's, some Electrify Americas, things like that. There's a charge point at the hospital, for example, and it's a post, and you plug it in, and it actually runs at about 24 amps, it looks like. So it puts somewhere around 20 miles per hour on the vehicle. So it's basically an AC thing, just like you would find in your house, like a 240 volt AC. I'm guessing, I'm just from what I'm seeing there. It's something like that, but it's just on a post in a public place so that you can actually access it and you can charge. So all 3 of those are great for standard types of charging where you're not concerned about the speed of the charging. Where it gets interesting, of course, is DC fast chargers, and those are the things that operate at like 150 kilowatts, 250 kilowatts, potentially eventually 400 kilowatts. In fact, I think some Electrify Americas will actually do 400 kilowatts. But as opposed to alternating current, which is that sine wave thing, right? That's what you have in your house. It's like just the current goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. So that's what you have in your house. This is direct current. This is the thing that Edison was all about back in the day, and why he electrocuted an elephant with alternating current to prove how dangerous it was and all this stuff. So if you're interested in that, you can go down the Edison versus Tesla rabbit hole, and I mean Tesla the inventor, not Tesla the car company, but obviously the car company is named after the inventor. Anyway, there was a lot of stuff. Alternating current clearly won out in the end because it's easier to transmit it over long distances. You can actually maintain these high voltages and high amperages through power lines, so it just became the de facto standard. But over short distances, when you're charging a DC battery, the battery you have in the car is direct current, and so the fastest way to charge it is just direct current. You just go direct current to direct current, and you can pump a lot more power into a battery a lot faster that way. So that is the way that works, and you can charge at a much faster speed. So that's the first little bit of education, is that there's 4 types of charging. There's the 120 volt, very, very, very slow charging, which is you can do in a pinch. Then there's the 240 volt, 24, 48 amps, something like that charging, which goes at about 20 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour, something along those lines. Then there is the destination charging, which is basically the same thing as that 240 volt home charger, which is 20 to 40 miles per hour. And then the interesting one for road trips, or if you really need to fill up quickly, that's more similar to a gas station than anything else, of course, is the direct current fast chargers, which Tesla's brand name for that is, of course, Superchargers. And at 150 kilowatts, these fast chargers can charge at a speed of about 500 miles an hour for a period of time, and I'm putting a star by that for a second. And then the 250 kilowatt versions can actually go up to 1,000 miles an hour-ish for a period of time as well. So they can charge very, very much quicker, right? If you're looking at 20 miles per hour versus 1,000 miles per hour, obviously the DC fast charger is way, way faster. But of course, speaking of that 500 or 1,000 miles per hour, there's a big asterisk with that. That's the maximum charging speed, and that changes drastically over the charging cycle for your car's battery. So say you bring your car in with a very, very low battery status, like 5% or something along those lines. You hook it up to a 250 kilowatt fast charger, it's going to bump up as soon as it heats the battery up and gets all the stuff optimal. It'll bump up to around 1,000 miles per hour of charging speed, the 250 kilowatts, very, very fast. But then as it gets up to like 30, 35, 40%, it starts to drop off. As it gets to 50%, it drops off significantly and gets down to about 150 kilowatts or maybe 500 miles an hour. And then it continues to slide throughout the entire rest of the charging cycle, particularly at the end. Getting from 10% to 80% is pretty fast with these things, but getting that 80% to 100% is very slow. So what you get is this like kind of, it's a curve that goes like this. The charge rate goes down and then it flattens at the end like this. So it just kind of flat lines. So you're only just getting a couple of miles an hour at the end when you're trying to fill the batteries up all the way. So the most important thing for people to understand when you're fast charging, if you don't know this already, is that you need to charge up to 80% unless there's some extenuating reason, like you've got to drive a long distance between now and the next charger on a road trip. Otherwise, 80% is fine, and it will take you as long to charge 80 to 100% as to charge 10% to 80% or more even. So don't just sit there. Don't put it up to 100% and then wait for like an hour or something for it to get to exactly 100%. Charge it up to 80%, you're fine. Just drive around, do whatever you need to do. So that's the number one thing that you need to know is when you're on these fast chargers, don't charge it up to 100% or above 80% unless you know you need that. And again, most of the time needing that means that you're on some sort of a road trip or something, because otherwise why sit there all that time and have it charge up that extra bit? And also this is one of the reasons I believe why a lot of charging station areas get full, is that people don't understand this and they charge for way too long. So Tesla has a way that they do this. They kind of compensate where if they see that the charging station is busy, they immediately knock your charge status down to 80% and you have to manually raise it back up above that. So good on them for that, because that's actually a very good way of mitigating this circumstance. But I believe that a lot of people, again, talking to them anecdotally, I don't have a scientific study here, but a lot of people immediately override that and put it up to 100% for no real good reason. They just do that because they think they need to. And then they sit there and they sit there and they sit there and they wait for the thing to get charged up. So number one thing, unless you really need it to be over 80%, just charge to 80% at the fast charger, especially if the charger is busy or you have places to go or something. And speaking of being busy, of course, when you're done charging, unplug the thing and move your car. Tesla will actually charge you an idle fee, I think $1 a minute if you're just sitting there, if you wait more than 5 minutes past the end of your charging cycle. So you will pay money for this, but also just be a good citizen. It'd be like going to a gas station and just like filling up your car and then just leaving it sitting there. Like, there's no reason for it to be there and nobody else can fill up their gas tank while your car is there. So it's the same sort of thing. You just need to be a good citizen. So number two thing is when you're done charging, at least move your car. Even if you're like at the mall or something and you're planning on shopping for several hours, just go outside for a minute, move the car to someplace else, and then go back into the mall and keep shopping, doing whatever it is you're doing. So by all means, be a good charging citizen. And while we're on that, if you have a gas car or you know people with gas cars, tell them please to not park in front of charging stations if at all possible. For example, at the hospital, I went and my battery was relatively low a couple of days ago, and I went to charge, and there were 4 charging stations, these charge point things. Every single one of them was filled up with a gas car that didn't even have an electrical outlet. The things were sitting there, with power on and just useless. I couldn't use them. Nobody else who had an EV could use them. I saw that a bunch of like Teslas were parked across the way from them. So clearly they had gone to get a charge and they couldn't do that. So by all means, if you're driving a gas car or if you don't need a charge, don't use that as a parking space unless it's absolutely necessary. Like there's literally nothing else in the parking lot to go to. It's a very rude thing, and you could really mess with people's plans because of course they get there and they need to charge up, and you should be nice to them. Next up, I guess this is point 4, is navigation is key. If you're going on any type of longer trip, use the navigation system, particularly in your Tesla. If you have other vehicles, I can't vouch for how good it is, but the Tesla app, I'm going to my parents' house. It's approximately 600 miles. I think 586 is the exact number. But anyway, I just put in my parents' address and it maps the whole things out, and it tells me where I need to stop, which superchargers, and how long I need to stop for. You can also, of course, use a better route planner or other pieces of software or something, but by all means use navigation software because it will tell you the status of your battery, when you're going to get there, how much you're going to have to charge for, all of that kind of stuff. Much, much safer than just driving and kind of hoping for the best and then running out of battery power and having to get AAA to tow you to the nearest supercharger or something. So if you're driving around and you're going to be doing a trip that necessitates getting a charge, use the navigation. It's so easy on a Tesla. You push the button on the right-hand side of the steering wheel and you say navigate to Costco or navigate to wherever you want to go. And it just does the whole thing for you. That's all you have to do. It's one button push and say where you want to go. And on that note as well, if you're charging up around town and so you're not really using navigation, you should still use navigation if you intend to go to a supercharger. So let's say you're going to go shopping again or something, and so your battery's at like 20% and you're like, oh, I'll charge up while I'm going shopping. charging. And in particular, if it's a Tesla Supercharger, put in that Tesla Supercharger as the destination. You can say like search for superchargers near me and then look for the one and click it. And you specifically want to do Supercharger because what happens is that the car starts to warm up the batteries so that they will charge more rapidly when you first get there. It makes it much, much more efficient. So if you know that you're going to be charging, whether it's on a road trip or whether it's going someplace that you know that there are superchargers, put the supercharger in, not the other destination, and then the car will know that and it will warm up the battery and make it charge way, way faster from the beginning. Especially, it's not quite as important in the summertime, but especially in the winter, the batteries can be very, very cold and it will take them some time to warm up to the temperature that they need to be warmed up to in order to charge efficiently. So to wrap up this section, understand that with the extension cord and the extra cord that you can purchase from Tesla, or if you have an older vehicle, they will have included it with the vehicle. But with that cord and just a regular plug, you can plug into any electrical outlet in the US and Canada and wherever, in Europe, wherever. You can plug into that outlet and you can charge at a very low speed, but you can still charge. So if you're going to a cabin way, way out in the middle of the woods or something, that could be a lifesaver because you can plug into the cabin and you can charge up the car while you're there and get some miles back on the car. If you have access to something like a dryer outlet or something, the 240 volt type of outlet, you can charge at a reasonable rate, overnight sort of charging to fill up the entire battery. Destination chargers are also very, very useful. And again, they operate at about that same sort of speed. And then the DC fast chargers are the ones where you can fill up really, really quickly. When you're charging, don't charge to over 80% unless you absolutely have to. When you're done charging, be sure you move your car out of the charging slot to be a good citizen to other people. If you're driving a gas car or you don't need to charge, please don't park in front of a supercharger or other charging station because that's rude to the people who actually need it. And remember, anytime you're going on a long road trip or if you just know that you need to go and charge, put in the destination, particularly on the Tesla, put it in the Tesla's navigation app so that it will begin to warm up the battery so that the battery will be at the proper temperature for charging when you actually arrive, and that will make everything much, much more efficient. All right, so that's the supercharger education portion. If you have other suggestions, by all means, leave those in the comments. I'm sure that I'm missing some good best practices to put in there, but help educate people by leaving things in there. I want to talk a little bit about this recent DeepMind paper. This is a marketpost.com article about this. I will leave a link to this in the description because I'm not going to read the whole thing. But the title is DeepMind Researchers Redefine Continual Reinforcement Learning with a Precise Mathematical Definition. The precise mathematical definition part is not as important, but what's really important is the idea of continual learning as opposed to just one-off type learning. Recent advances in deep reinforcement learning, or RL, have demonstrated superhuman performance by artificially intelligent agents on a variety of impressive tasks. Current approaches for achieving these results follow developing an agent that primarily learns how to master a narrow task of interest. Untrained agents have to perform these tasks often, and there is no guarantee that they would generalize to new variations, even for a simple reinforcement learning model. On the contrary, humans continuously acquire knowledge and adapt to generalize to new scenarios during their lifetime. This is called continual reinforcement learning, or CRL. The view of learning in RL is that the agent interacts with the Markov environment to identify an optimal behavior efficiently. Search for optimal behavior would cease the point of learning. For example, imagine playing a well-predefined game like chess. Once you have mastered the game, the task is complete and you stop learning about new game scenarios. One must view learning as an endless adaptation rather than viewing it as finding a solution. Continuous reinforcement learning, or CRL, involves such study. It is a supervised, never-ending, and continual learning. And then the researchers go on to explain how they mathematically do this sort of thing. But I just want to mention the first part of this, the sort of big picture idea of this. If you know anything about machine learning, in general, narrow AIs, traditional AIs, are designed to complete a task. So it's like play chess would be one. Checkers might be easier. How about tic-tac-toe? Tic-tac-toe is nice and simple. It's easy to understand, easy to master. It has an objective function or a loss function, which is that you would play games and you would discover like, oh, I lost that game. That guy beat me or something, right? So it would do this over and over and over again. And it would begin to create some sort of an understanding of what the game is and how to win at that game. But the problem is that there's a series of solutions to the game of tic-tac-toe, depending on when you start. And then, of course, much more complicated is checkers, and then much more complicated is chess, and much more complicated is Go. But all of them are well-defined games. And once you discover the sort of set of solutions, you're sort of done. That's the end of the learning process. You've gone over the search space, or the Markovian environment, as they call it. You've discovered the minimums in those areas. In other words, you've done the best that you can, the minimum amount of error. You figured that out, and then you're like, cool, I'm done. I've figured out the problem, and I'm finished. And that's great for narrow AI. But what they're saying here is that for continual reinforcement learning, don't just have these agents learn one thing, but have them continually do this. And essentially, it's a way of kind of moving the goalposts. So it's like every time they get close to solving it, they just keep moving it and moving it and moving it and moving it and moving it, so that these things are always having to continue to keep learning and to keep training. And this is the way to create a generalized intelligence rather than a narrow intelligence. So rather than solving one problem, this creates an agent that's able to solve a variety of problems, either in a related area or just sort of overall. And so you can think about something like Tesla's full self-driving as an example of this. This would be an agent that is trying to learn how to drive in the real world. Well, the real world, it's not simple. There is no simple solution set to the real world. That's what they call about edge cases and corner cases all the time. There's just lots and lots and lots of stuff that's going on in the real world that makes this difficult. So what it has to do is every time it gets close to solving the problem, you move the goalpost, you make the problem harder. Then you move the goalpost, you make it harder, and you move the goalpost, you make it harder. So that this continual reinforcement learning idea, which I'm not saying that that's exactly what Tesla is doing, but you can think about it for full self-driving. But what's happening here is the agent is learning and learning and learning. It's a lifetime of learning, just like a human being would do, right? You always keep learning, hopefully, or else I don't know. If you're not learning, something's gone wrong and you have a problem. But the idea is that you're learning. Even after you get to be a good driver, you can still learn and become a better driver. Now, yeah, it's like tiny, tiny little incremental improvements over time, but you can become a better and better driver by continually learning about that. Just like you could keep learning about mathematics or literature or whatever by continually studying that you can continue that mode of operation rather than saying, oh, I found the solution and I'm done. So it's just a really interesting conceptual thing. It could have very important implications for more complex types of situations, like language, like generating images, like interacting with human beings and things. This continual reinforcement learning idea is actually very, very cool for real world scenarios. And more than likely, if we get to an artificial general intelligence, it's going to have to be something like this that has kind of, you could call it a built-in desire to keep learning. I don't know if desire, because that's kind of an emotional term, but it's got this built-in need to keep learning and not to just go like, oh, I've discovered the minimum in this solution space and so I'm done. It's like, well, okay, so let's change the search space and let's find something else and continue to delve into this and find many, many, many solutions. So anyway, if you're interested, definitely read the entire post, and you can go and read the original article if you want to as well. I just thought I would bring it up because I think it's a very cool new technique that they're talking about, and they've come up with sort of a mathematical definition and an understanding of how it works, which is also very cool. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking, and definitely let me know what you think about me tacking on some AI stuff at the end of some of my videos. For sure, let me know about that in the comments. While you're down there, please be sure to like the video and also consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and of course my ex-subscribers. Thank you all so much for your support, and if you want to join the team, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new Tesla, a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.